August the 7th, 2022. As you're looking at the latest U.S. drought monitor, it includes Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, on the right side, Mariana Islands and Marshall Islands and American Samoa. But if you're looking at the very dark red areas, you're looking at the most severe. Then your red is a little less severe, but it goes all the way down to the yellow area, which is extremely dry. It's not technically part of the drought yet, and you see that here in central Mississippi. Another thing, as we're looking at the map to be aware of, is that these black lines that you see here that come up the Mississippi River, loop around, and come back down through Alabama, those black lines, they separate sections of the drought. And what I'm saying by that, notice here in Tennessee it says S right there. Now that means that the drought is a short-term drought. The L's, which you see over here and just above Northern California into Washington, that's a long-term drought. Here into New Mexico, long-term. This entire area here, coming all the way to the Texas border, extreme drought, long-term. When you've got an S and an L, it's short-term, both short-term and long-term droughts. Now, it doesn't look like there's a lot of relief for the Southwest. We did have monsoon-type rains in Death Valley. Dozens of cars and roads were damaged. Cars were covered and floated away. And we've seen that across the nation in a few areas. We've seen it across the northern hemisphere in a few areas also. But that's what we're looking at now. Here, where you've got the area of Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California, New Mexico, that was in the last video about Lake Powell, Mead, down to Lake Mojave, and then into Lake Havasu. We'll take a quick look at those readings. But notice that area is in the dark red, again, the exceptionally the worst drought you can get. And it's both short and long term. This goes all the way up to the Great Lakes here in Utah. Notice the areas in California here that's an extreme drought, but a good section of California, especially the Center Valley, good section of Utah, Nevada. Then you go into the eastern edges of New Mexico that gets the worst, and then Texas, you've got it all over here. You go up along the nation, you can see it again. S is short term, L is long term. Now, Florida, you're in pretty good shape. South Mississippi, you're in good shape up into the central part where we are at here. That's because we've been getting these afternoon rains, and it took us out of that yellow, very dry stage. You got a couple of those in Florida, but here in North Carolina, something that's interesting, some of you guys that are there, let us know in the comments, you're in a long-term drought. See this L in this black area, this would be the eastern half of the state. And you've got both extremely dry, and then the tan areas is the first, that's the beginning of the drought. I'll scroll down and show you that. Notice Hawaii. You've got some drought areas along your western sections of your islands. And in Puerto Rico, you've got some very dry drought conditions there, U.S. Virgin Islands. Now, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, possibly the east coast of the U.S. is about to get a break tropically as far as moisture. Just came off the African coast. We're going to take a look at it. It was on the coast yesterday. It emerged overnight, and the track appears to be not headed towards the Gulf of Mexico, but it looks like it's going to go maybe north of Puerto Rico in that area. But depending on the size of this Atlantic storm, it's we'll take a look at it. It was a 40% chance this morning. That may have changed. But that may bring moisture through the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and depends on how the high pressure that's stationed over the Atlantic, guys, how it contracts. If it contracts quickly back northward, then that's going to let this hurricane turn, possibly not affect the East Coast, except for maybe some moisture and some spin-offs. Well, we're kind of a few days out on that, but let's take a quick look at the National Hurricane Center information. Now, this was at 2 p.m. Eastern, just over an hour ago, And guys, what you're seeing here is 40% chance, same as this morning. But notice that let me pull this back up. Again, last night it was setting onshore in Africa. Now it has skirted south and offshore, and it's going to move below the islands here. But notice this curve, and that usually indicates that that the high pressure area that's on top of all this in the center will ease up somewhat and let the storm curve. Now, how far this will go, we'll find out each day as this projection moves forward in time. But right now, let's read this. You've got a 40% chance of cyclone formation in 5 days. Tropical wave located near the west coast of Africa is producing disorganized showers and thunderstorms over the far eastern tropical Atlantic. Environmental conditions appear generally conducive for gradual development of the system while it moves westward to west-northwestward at 15 to 20 miles an hour across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. Tropical depression could form around the middle to latter part of this week. Again, right now, a 2-day chance, a 2-day forecast is 0 chance of formation, but it's moving into the area where we're talking about it being conducive. So the 5-day forecast is 40%. Check that out. Now, let's take a look at the satellite that's over the western coast of Africa. And in this section of the screen, right there, guys, is what has come offshore. Last night, it was onshore. It was a 30% chance of development, but now that it's off into the Atlantic itself, 40% chance. And it said for the next 48 hours, it's a 0% chance of development. You've got a lot of upper-level shear and cross currents. See this movement under the upper-level clouds here. But once it clears this area, more to the center and left of your screen, all the wind currents and air movement is straight from the right to the left or from the east to the west, the same direction as the hurricane. That could have some effect on the path of the storm because it's going to be dealing with bouncing off an upper level high that you can kind of see defined right above these clouds right there. Then this thing balloons out and changes daily. But that current right there could become, again, a factor on how far it moves to the west before it starts that northerly turn. And again, some of you guys can really use it. And we're going to look at a situation in Florida that not necessarily just drought, but it's something you need to be aware of. Notice the Saharan sand layer while we are on this satellite image. It's not dominant. It's being caught up in this section of where the winds are crossing. That's what, again, why the storm is not going to develop. So the air layer, the Saharan air layer, should not affect the storm because sand and dust absorb the moisture that's needed for the storms to develop. It takes away that energy. But guys, there hasn't been a storm now all through July. We're 1 week away. On the 15th, we'll be a month away from September 15th, which is the peak. So we've had an extremely quiet year. We had a few storms earlier, remember? What does that tell you if you don't have any storms in July? Why do hurricanes form? They form because of the heat of the oceans. And what happens? You see the big clouds form, they start to spin, you see the eye, and it lifts all of that hot air off the surface of the ocean into the upper atmosphere and cools it. If not, the earth would overheat. It's a natural thing that has to happen. Is weather sometimes manipulated? Of course it is. Has been being for a long time. But when you get one of these strong storms, when you're dealing with the power of our Father in heaven, then it'll go where He wants it to go. So we'll just have to wait and see about this. But again, we're going to look at a couple of the models that, again, it's a long way out, but we'll see how that high pressure bubble is looking, because that, again, will be between that and this westerly movement of this air currents will determine where this thing goes. It wouldn't hurt. You saw the yellow areas in Florida, and it would definitely not hurt that eastern half of North Carolina you see in the long-term drought and very dry condition situation there. Now, this is the Canadian model. It's one of the more accurate ones. We watch it every year. And it's not showing much on the storm. You can see this system that's moving off the African coast. This is a second system as it paused at the end. But here we see it moving under this orange area that is that Atlantic high pressure. Now, what happens in the next few frames is important. Notice this opening and gap right there. And so, depending on how far the storm makes it, it looks like the high pressure system is going to stay in control of it. Once it starts bumping into this area, move it into the Bahamas and possibly up the East Coast. Now, this is not showing really that storm. There's already some moisture and clouds off the East Coast. We'll take a look at the U.S. radar and the Caribbean and Gulf. But again, what we're paying attention to, they're not showing much development in the storm because it's too far out. You'll really see that pick up in the next few days. But what we are seeing is, again, the steering of this high pressure area until right at the end of this cycle and an opening. That could be good news as far as moisture for the eastern half of the U.S. But a big hurricane like that can be devastating. Maybe it will come in as a tropical storm, skirt the coast, and give you much needed moisture. That's the best case scenario. We're too far out to really know for sure. But that high pressure area, and that now we have the winds moving from east to west, that's going to be the main factor in this. And there actually will be three. The extreme temperatures of the Atlantic that's built up with zero tropical activity in over 30 days. Now, this is the GFS model. It goes out for a long timeline, but it's noted even in its information that it's basically a short-term projection. In other words, the first 2 or 3 days here are the most accurate. After that, the percentage of accuracy goes way down, but you notice the storm is developing here. The high pressure is above it. It's centered inside these lines of pressure. Comes in here, catches that gap like we were talking about, and somewhere it looks like it's going to turn up. It may miss the East Coast altogether. We don't know yet. But again, let's look at this path. Right through there, skirting above the islands, even above the Bahamas at this time. But guys, we're a long way out. And again, this one is definitely showing in its short-term projection development, and that would be in that 40%. Now, again, as of 2 p.m. this afternoon, Sunday, you can see the wide Atlantic. It's kind of a combination of radar and satellite images in the infrared. You can see where the storms are, and here's our system we're watching just off the African coast. But notice there is moisture in the Caribbean, especially in the southern Caribbean here, a little in the Gulf, and there's some, like I mentioned earlier, already off the East Coast. That could help you guys in those areas somewhat. Again, we'll be watching that. Now, I want to go back to Florida for a moment, guys. It's not in the extreme drought conditions. You saw some dry areas there. But what is happening is we went from 100 farmers in South Florida. These are huge farms, some over 1,000 acres, and some larger than that. But they provide a lot of food for the entire east coast of the U.S. You've got green beans, you've got sweet corn in this area. And what's happening, we'll read a little bit about it. They're saying South Florida farmers are tapping out due to inflation, increased cost of agricultural inputs like diesel fuel. We've been seeing that. Also, a main concern is fertilizer. It says the ongoing inflation has brought farmers in South Florida to the breaking point, with some tapping out as a result of higher cost. Guys, it's not just some. We're talking about 90% have tapped out. Longtime farmer John Alger, owner of Alger Farms, lamented that simply breaking even has been a struggle for the last 10 years. The pandemic, inflation, and supply chain issues only made things worse, much worse. Alger's miles-long farm, which grows sweet corn and green beans, supplies the entire East Coast with food crops. The longtime grower and his dog spend most of their time on the farm, but with things as they are, he may consider leaving farming for good. Alger Farms have been in operation since the 1930s. We're at a crossroads right now. We don't know whether we should continue to even go through this next winter. Our costs are 26% higher than what they were 2 years ago. He said, my numbers say stop. A man with common sense would stop. For the last 10 years, it's been just been a very expensive hobby, just trying to break even. Alger said his farm's 10-year average return is 15% less than the projected cost to keep it running. Guys, been doing it for 10 years. The situation forced him to tap into his savings just to keep the farm afloat. The number of farmers in South Florida have dwindled over the years due to the rising cost of farming. The area used to have more than 100 farmers. Now there are only 9. It's pretty bleak, he said, projecting the future of agriculture. He also expressed concern toward American consumers. That's you and me. Do they have enough money left over to pay a price for produce that will keep me sustainable? In other words, if he jacks his price up where he can make a living, will the inflation that we see now, will that allow anyone to purchase it? That's the dilemma right now, said Alger. He warned that without a significant change, the U.S. would soon become a country dependent on imports for food. The only problem with that, guys, is all the nations are in trouble right now for one reason. Same thing, fertilizer, diesel, drought, or flood, and the Great Reset. He said he plans to sit idle for a year. If the conditions do not approve, his departure from farming will be for good. Part of the plan. He said things will only get worse for farmers. Flavio Carrillo, director of Florida International University Capital Markets Lab, said the issues farmers are facing will only get worse. Gasoline, for example, has risen over 60% in the last calendar year, exerting tremendous pressure on farmers who depend on fuel to work their lands. A spike in fertilizer prices following the Russia-Ukraine war also added fuel to the fire. Ohio farmer Scott Stickley attested to the impact skyrocketing fertilizer cost had on his farm. Last year, nitrogen, which is fertilizer, was around $170 a ton. This year, at the local dealer, it was around $600 a ton. And they have a right to ask the most legitimate question of all: who can afford to have this impact on inflation? He shared, I was able to buy in front of some of the inflation, but it's still almost double what I bought last year. According to Stickley, the massive price increases added roughly $50 per acre to farming costs, which translates to a huge expense as he manages roughly 1,900 acres of corn and soybeans. He said the probability of a downturn in the economy over the next 12 months is 48%, up from 30% in just the previous month. Unfortunately, the stress caused by uncertainty may be too great to bear for many farmers. And there's a video there, I'll link to this article, where Marsha Blackburn is on Fox, and they're talking about this very thing and how these skyrocketing prices. Your diesel's too high, and your fertilizer not only too high, guys. Remember, they're shutting down transport. They're shutting down rail transport for both diesel additives, and fertilizer, and grain. We know what's happening. And your main concern is to figure out a way to make it through this initial wave of shutdown and protect your family. We're going to stay inside the southern district of the Colorado River, and we'll start up at the top of that with Lake Powell. Lake Powell is 164 feet below full pool elevation at 3,700. Lake Powell is down 17.64 feet from 1 year ago. Let's scroll down to this information. Now, it comes in, you've got 14 days here, but each day at the top, you're going to lose a day at the bottom and add one to the top. Video yesterday, we did not have August 6th, so tomorrow we'll have the August 7th information. But here, Lake Powell, your inflow is 5,815 cubic feet per second. Your outflow is not quite double that, 9,382 feet. So you're going to start to see, and we were starting to see this over the last 5 or 6 days, almost doubling in the outflow compared to the inflow from up on the Colorado northern basin and the Green River. So we notice that we were here at outflow was at 12,000, 12,000, 12,000 for the last 5 days. The only time you hit input was very close to that at all was here on Monday, August 1st at 11,843. So now we're starting to see the inflow going down. So that means the river above is still dry. You got dehydration and evaporation, and you've got controlling dams in the northern Colorado River Basin. But again, inflow at 58, outflow is not quite double, so we're going to start to see that impact. Today is the 7th. In 1 week, on the 15th of August, the feds have threatened to take complete control over this Colorado River system, I think through the Bureau of Reclamation, Now, someone said in the comments of the video, the last one we did about this, that the feds already, it's a federal project, so they already control it. That's true, but it looks like through lobbying and other things, they gave the locals in the states some control and say-so. In other words, if all of you guys in these river basins can agree on how you're going to share this water and how you're going to conserve it, the water, then we may give you more of your own, more rain to make your own decisions. But when it comes down to a crisis, we're going to step in. Now, guys, you know this is part of the plan. But right now, you've got not quite twice as much going up. Yesterday, you did have twice as much going out as you did going in. Inflow is decreasing. Outflow is slightly decreasing. But they're going to try to balance this in this week. Now, again, let's go 350 miles by the river downstream to Lake Mead, just to the east of Vegas. Last 14 days, again, it says Mead is up 0.64 feet. They were in a panic to balance this thing off because we were losing 1.5 to 2 foot every 2 weeks until just a few days ago. About the time those monsoons and floods hit Vegas, we started to see a little bit of rise, but all of that's drained down now. So what we're dealing with today, inflow, 16,000. That's strong. Because the 350 miles upriver, you've got twice the outflow at Lake Powell. So outflow, they've cut back more than, you've got twice as much coming in. Again, 1 week away, they don't want to get too many hands in the pie there in Vegas. But the outflow is 7880. That's been going on now for several days. What you've got here is where it changed. You were getting more on the outflow at 1,700 cubic feet per second, and the inflow at 14.7. That was last Tuesday on August the 2nd. But now we're seeing inflow being held back. That's why you're seeing it's up 0.64 feet. Now, we're going to move to Lake Mojave, the next one in the 4-dam stage. Now, Mojave is up 0.93 feet, almost a foot in the last 14 days. That's what this is saying here. Now, this one Mojave has seemed to stay more balanced than the upper two dams at Powell and Lake Mead there. But your inflow, 7490, your outflow is less. But notice that the inflow coming from where? Lake Mead has went from 10,600 cubic feet per second per day to 749. That's because Mead is stopping the outflow. You can see the balance. Now drop further to Lake Havasu, you're up 0.58 of eighths of a foot, just a little over half a foot in the last 14 days. All of these dams, again, these two stay more balanced, Havasu and Mojave, than the other ones. You can tell looking back at the records. But you are dealing with an inflow from Lake Mojave at 7,200 cubic feet per second and an outflow at 8,700 cubic feet per second. Now that has just changed because they had kind of shut the gates too. They were getting 10,400 cubic feet per second on Friday, 8,000 on Thursday, but notice 3,200 on Thursday, 8,200. So what they had really shut those outflow doors to make everything look balanced, which I get, that's probably the best they can do right now. Anyway, even though it's the best they can do, it is still very temporary. I mean, it's very temporary balancing act in order to try to keep the feds off their back completely. But it's not going to last long, and the feds would probably like nothing more than to step in completely, and then they will control all of the decisions on where the water goes and the hydroelectrical system, where that energy is sent out to. And that will, of course, be determined by the output at the dams. But I've noticed in some of the images, if you look closely on the Google Maps, satellite images, you can see that they're really building along some of these areas, right outside of the dams, large solar panel farms. And I'm sure that's an anticipation. Even though they don't really want to talk about it, it is in anticipation of the hydroelectrical system shutting down at the dams. So it's something to think about, something to be prepared for. I don't see a short-term fix in the climate, and it's a natural thing. We talked about it in the comments in the last video. It's a natural occurrence over the history of the nation of the Southwest and the native tribes that droughts have occurred. But the key difference now in recovery is that the population was nowhere near this. Nowhere. And so that the drain continues. And we only can guess where some of this water is going. But when you get down to that bottom straw in Mead, Vegas is going to be in they're going to be in trouble. So, well, let me say one other thing. In the comments from the last video, a lot of people were talking about piping water from the Mississippi River over the mountains and over all the desert and everything like that, or desalination plants being built and pumping water from the Pacific Ocean. Neither one of those projects, if possible, could be built in time to save any of these places. None of them. Not only that, the Mississippi River has its drought and problems here. It'll get so low in some places you can almost walk across it. Barge traffic and stuff like that is affected. But so that would, it not only would it not happen because the people along from the Great Lakes all the way into the Gulf of Mexico depend on the Mississippi River and the tributaries, and they're not going to give that up. So you can axe that idea. But again, to build the multi-pipe infrastructure, one pipe wouldn't do it. It would take multiple large pipes. I'm talking about a field full of them running the entire distance. And there's our other husky, the other young one, Bandit, the black and white one, coming in here. I think he wants to go out on the deck where Tina is. There they go. Anyway, they're always going to come in here and let you know what's going on. So it's part of the deal. I don't mind. They are, I've said it before, a great blessing and a great peace of mind to me. They really fill up big holes in your life. You don't have any time for yourself, but you get a lot of joy out of your time, if that makes any sense. So those ideas of desalination, the expense, first of all, the time to build the infrastructure, to get it to places that it should never be in the first place, in the desert. Come on, guys. Are you moving to Vegas for the building opportunities of construction, or are you for the casinos, or whatever the business is? I understand the need to make a living, but you're about to have to do something different. The human body or plant life or animal life cannot survive without water, and you're about to find out the hard way about this. Some people are saying it's going to happen sooner than later. But the alternative will not be construction. Not only that, with the Great Reset, guys, do you think they would put the money up to save part of the nation? Wouldn't that go completely opposite of the plan? So it's time to get real. And It's good ideas, but we're really way past the point of anything like that happening. And I don't think you could get enough water desalinated or out of the Mississippi River to do much good anyway. So just be prepared for it. Again, what is the rule? You learned it in grade school. When the climate changes drastically, you move, migrate, or die. 3 laws. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.